Good evening, everyone. Melo, Nancy. So tonight this is our second Monday of 2018. And as we usually do here at Continue, we have our English meeting. And we conduct the entire meeting in English from beginning to end, from our prayer to our announcements, the main topic, the conversations that we have. And as I talked to Nancy before, she told me that she could do the initial prayer. So I'm going to invite her to do our initial prayer so that we can start our meeting for tonight, Nancy.
Good evening, everyone. Dear Lord, God of the universe, creator of the seen and unseen, we are gathering here to hear your word. Give us the help we need to open our ears, both physical and spiritual, so we may grow close to your heart. In joining ourselves together here, we add our love to yours, to the angels, guides, and helpers. We pray for both ourselves and for the disincarnated people, who may be in more need than we can ever know, for only you can see into mankind's hearts. Help us to help others and to learn by experience. In your sight there is no chaos. Only order reigns in your universe. And whether we understand or not, it is all in your great design. Guide the angels into all our hearts, so they may continue to lead us out of the darkness. Give us the courage, Lord, to fight the good fight. Please guide and lead each and every one of us on tonight's study. So be it. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Nancy, for the prayer. That's a very inspiring prayer, actually. And we pray that Jesus is always with us and that his messengers are here to help us and to inspire us to read these messages, understand these messages, and may we be able to practice these messages. So tonight I'm going to do the inspirational message, and after that we're going to start a new study of a new chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Before we do that, though, let's read the message, which is from this book here, Our Daily Bread. And this is one of the covers. There are many different covers for this book. There's an electronic version of the book as well, so you can buy it, download, or and read it. That's perfectly fine. And this book was psychographed by the Brazilian medium Francisco Cândido Xavier, well more known or as known as Chico Xavier. And the spirit who wrote through him is called Emmanuel, which was his spirit guide through his entire life, helping him and inspiring him to do all the work that he did. So this book is divided in small chapters. Our Daily Bread is part of this collection of books, which is called Living Spring. There are 5 books in this collection, which they are all the same. They look the same, and the messages are written in the same way. So Emmanuel takes a small passage from the Bible and read and get that small passage, a small verse, either from the apostles or from one of the letters of Paul or John or the Gospels, and then Emmanuel after that does a small explanation of or interpretation of that small passage. And the message that we are reading tonight is from chapter 95 of Our Daily Bread. And the title of the message is funny when we say it, because the title of the message is This is the Message. So tonight's message is This is the Message. And it's actually taken from the first letter of John, chapter 3, and verse number 11. And John wrote this: "For this is the message you have heard from the beginning. Let us love one another." For this is the message you have heard from the beginning. Let us love one another. Then Emmanuel comes and makes the following comment. And by the way, this message I would really recommend. Of course, we always say the same thing, but some messages, maybe they touch us in different ways than others. And this message to me is it really touches me deeply. And so I really like this message here, number 95. So Emmanuel says, and I'm going to read it. So I recommend that you read the message if you have the book, either in Portuguese or in English or whatever language you prefer, because it has a lot of things that are worth taking a careful and deep look inside the message. So Emmanuel says, all over the world, we feel a tremendous longing for new messages from heaven. The dynamic forces of thought insist on receiving modern expressions of old truths, and this provides opportunities for different mental creations. We can see, however, that art, in seeking new expressions, is populated with negative images, that politics, in creating ideologies and new processes for governing, expands the course of destructive war, and that science, in seeking to soar ever higher, invents theories that impinge on harmony and well-being. The great branches of religion are making a gallant effort to demonstrate the eternality of life by beseeching spectacular signs from the invisible realm for ordinary people. We must agree that the lofty aspirations of the human spirit are always useful when it truly seeks expressions of a divine nature. However, we must also agree that even though there are countless substantial, spiritually constructive, and illuminating messages on earth, the greatest and most invaluable of all, ever since the beginning of the planet's organization, has been that of fraternal solidarity in "let us love one another." This is a fundamental recommendation. By understanding its meaning, each disciple can examine, in life's daily circle of struggle, the level of understanding that he or she already possesses regarding the divine plan. Even if this or that brother or sister has not yet grasped its meaning, begin exercising this fatherly recommendation yourself. Love always. Do all the good you can. Start by appreciating those who do not understand you, knowing that they will make you a better person more quickly. This is the message. What I find very interesting about this message in particular is, and that's why I really like it, is because in a sense, Emmanuel touches in something that's not spirituality. He touches in something that's based on how we are and who we still are. We are always looking, independently of religion. Let's forget religion for a second. We are always looking for new things. Always. We always want a new car. We always want a new TV. We always want a new shoe. We always want another new shoe. We always want another, a third, a fourth new shoe, right? A bag, a second bag, a fifth bag, right? We always want new things. We always want a new whatever, a new sound, a new CD, a new CD is old. Nobody wants CDs anymore. But we always want new music. We always, right? We are always looking for new things, for new things, for new things. And where is this leading us? That's the question. What are we finding when we find this new thing? It appears to me that it is as if we are trying to fill a gap of something that's missing, but these things will not replace what is missing. And I'm not saying that we should be against it. Of course not. If something is old and something is not working and there's something that's really better and that we can replace it without having any problems or causing problems for somebody or for ourselves, why shouldn't we do it? We should do it. That's no problem with that. The problem is sometimes that we didn't even use the previous one. We didn't even have the chance to enjoy, to really have it and have it for a while before replacing it. And that's what Emmanuel touches here. He touches this in us in this specific point, as if the message that came from Jesus and actually came from before Jesus was here on earth with us is the same message. But we keep looking for new messages or for a new way of seeing that message, as if the old message got old and it's out of date, out of fashion, and we need something new to replace it. And that's how most of the times, unfortunately, and this is not because we are bad people or no, it's just because we don't stop to reflect on it, to really feel it and have that message come into ourselves. So when John gives us and says, for this is the message, it comes from the old times. Let us love one another. It doesn't matter where you are from, where we are from, if we believe in this or in that religion. If we go and look for the deepest message in any single one religion, is always related to this deep love that we should all have for one another. And not only for another person, but for earth, for the tree, for the thing that I have. Because there's nothing wrong in loving the car that I have, that I fought so hard, that I worked so hard to have it. What we shouldn't do is to put more love towards things than towards what really matters, which is people, which is feeling, which is sentiment, which is this love that's bigger than ourselves. So the message can be updated or can be shown in a different way for our eyes to see the same message over and over again in a different form, in a different way. That's nice. But if we are seeing the message over and over again through different ways, and we're not really doing what Emmanuel asks us to do in the end of the message, when he says, so love always. Do all the good you can. Start by appreciating those who do not understand you, knowing that they will make you a better person more quickly. Let us love one another. It is not for us to love the ones who love us. That's not what the saying says. It only says love. And it may be an old message. It may be from time immemorial. It doesn't matter. We can say it in million different ways. We can say it in different languages, but we can update it, change the word. But if the message remains the same at the bottom, love. It's the first and the most powerful message of all. This is the message. That's the message from the book Our Daily Bread. So that's what we intended to talk about this message. And once again, I really highly recommend that you get the book or go on the internet and do just a simple search. This is the message, chapter 95, Our Daily Bread. You will find the message there. It's easy. You don't even need to buy the book if you don't have access to the book. But if you have access to the internet, these messages are all over the place, so we can find it, read it, and let's read and try to practice what the message says. So now I'm just going to switch something there in the computer, and I'll be back so that we can start talking about now the Gospel according to Spiritism, going on chapter 5. Just one second. And I'm back. So, like I was saying, we are gonna talk a little bit about the beginning of chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, which also you can also find this book online. You can find all the messages, all the chapters, every single comma, and every single word that's here. You can find it online. Chapter 5 is entitled, Blessed Are the Afflicted. And the curiosity about this chapter is that's the biggest chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism.
I know.
What?
Chapter 5.
Apparently, Kardec wants to tell us something, right? Blessed are the afflicted. So the question starts, who is the afflicted? Right? I look at Adriana and I don't see her afflicted. You know,
Never.
I look in the mirror and I don't see anybody afflicted. Right? I don't see any nails on my hands either. So I don't know what's going on. So apparently Kardec already knew that, either because he was afflicted, and maybe he was. You know, we are all at the same boat, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know? So we all have our afflictions, our difficulties, our problems. But of course, he did this not only because he understood that he was afflicted in some degree as well, but because he was a great teacher. And as a great teacher, as a person that's a master and likes things to be organized and for us to really think about, they think more about these topics than us. So they prepare the topics for us. And that's one of the reasons why the chapter is so big, of course, because it will deal with a lot of our problems, and lots of things that are going through our lives or on with our lives. And he's going to discuss why do we suffer? What's happening? What's behind the scenes of the suffering? And that's what the chapter is about. But before going to the chapter, before going to what we're going to talk about, which is the justice of afflictions, or in other ways, why do we suffer? I would also like to point that, as I just mentioned, that Kardec is such a great teacher and a great organizer, that these chapters of the Gospel according to Spiritism, although sometimes when we are doing the gospel at home or the God at home, we sometimes just flip through the pages and choose one message to read, which is fine, and there's no problem in that. But if we really want to get a good understanding of how and what Spiritism and how Spiritism looks at Jesus's message, the way Kardec organized the book is very, very important for us to really, really feel Jesus's message. And why am I saying this? You know, we're going to start to talk about afflictions, that we are blessed, or because we are afflicted. Blessed are the afflicted. And that, of course, refers to lots of what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, which is, blessed are they who weep, blessed are they who suffer injustice, who are thirsty and hungry for justice, and for they are going to inherit the earth. That's where Kardec took the title of the book. Of course, not of course, but Jesus didn't say, blessed are the afflicted. This is not a sentence from Jesus. But Kardec joined the idea of crying, of suffering, and then merged the blessed are those who suffer, whatever suffering is, if it's crying, if it's of hunger, if it's of injustice. So, but for us to understand this chapter, for us to really understand Jesus's message, for us to really understand and go deep in what Jesus wants us to understand, Kardec used the 4 previous chapters plus the introduction to create in our minds this idea of, without this basis, there is no way that we will really deeply understand why we suffer. So I'm just going to relate and read the titles of the previous chapters, so that I can just briefly summarize them, although we've been studying them, but I think it's worth taking another look at the titles at least. When on chapter 1 of the book, Kardec chose, I have not come to destroy the law. That's a saying of Jesus. So Jesus is saying, look, maybe I will tell you something that is new. We just spoke about this, right? Maybe I'm going to tell you something that is new. Maybe. But look, I didn't come to destroy what you already believe. What is the real law? I came maybe to show you a different way of looking at that law, but the law will not be touched by what I'm going to say. Will not be destroyed. I'm going to fulfill every single thing that the law requires from us. And where he starts? Love God above everything else. That's the first one. And throughout his life, when we are reading and we are studying Jesus, we see it over and over and over again. Him repeating and repeating the same things that he's been studying, that he's been knowing from the Old Testament. So when comes that person and asks him, oh, what is the greatest commandment of all? And said, he wants to test Jesus. And Jesus looks at him and says, here's the first commandment, love your God above everything else. But see, by looking at you, I know that you don't understand what that is. So here is the second one, which is close to the first one. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those 2 commandments, if you practice them, you're saved. And then the guy asks, but who is my neighbor? Then comes all the story later. But I'm not going this path, otherwise I'm not going to talk about the topic. So these 2 commandments that Jesus mentions at that moment, he is not creating these 2 commandments. He's fulfilling the law. Those 2 commandments are in the Old Testament. So he's not creating anything new. He's just presenting it to a person who already knows that those commandments are in the law. And the person comes to ask him as if to test him, and he says, look, it's there. I'm not coming to teach you new things. I'm coming to show you how to do it. That's the big difference. So I have not come to destroy the law. Although some people think that he destroyed the law. Because he uses the law in such a deep meaning, in such a deep way, that the person says, oh, you cannot do this, because if you do this, I'm not going to be able to do it, so you're breaking the law. No, actually, you are breaking the law because you're not doing it. I am just doing the law, doing what the law says. But he didn't come to destroy the law. Then the second chapter is, my kingdom is not of this world. So Jesus comes and tells us that, look, if my kingdom was of this world, people would have come and would have saved me. But I'm not of this world. My kingdom is not of the material life. What I came here for was to show you that this is important, matter is important, our life here is very important, but there's much more than this life. There's way more things than this simple material life. And then Kardec goes on chapter 3, and he says, in my Father's house are many mansions, saying that Jesus is showing us that there are other levels of life in here, when we have discarnate people amongst us, just like he talked to a few of them when he was incarnated, right? He expelled demons from people. What is he doing then? He's telling us that there's souls of people who are dead, and then they're surrounding us. Paul says in one of his letters, there's this multitude of people, of this multitude of witnesses, witnessing what we are living. So there's lots of spirits around us. This is a different level of humanity, or a different level of life. Not that it's better or worse. It's just in a different form. And there are many mentions in different planets as well. Different ways of life, different manners of living with matter that we cannot see. Forms of people that we cannot see. So this is chapter 3. Then chapter 4, to close this initial session of the Gospel according to Spiritism, when he says, I have not come to destroy the law. My kingdom is not of this world. There are many mansions in my Father's house. And except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven. So he says, I didn't come to destroy the law. Matter is important, but there's more to life than just matter. So when you die, you will keep living. And then for you to be perfect, you will need to come back. So with this introduction, these 4 chapters, now we are ready, thanks Kardec. Now we are ready to understand why we suffer. Without these 4 initial chapters, I'm not saying that we cannot understand, we could understand, but makes it much easier to understand it. Because if we need to reincarnate, if we need to come back, there needs to be a reason for that. And why would we come back? What would the reasons be for that? And of course, he explains it in detail on the chapter. Last month, Hendrik was here talking about the process of incarnation and so on. And it's all there on the internet, on the list of what we recorded. So you can always go back and watch what Hendrik said. But there was like maybe 6 or 7 talks here about chapter 4, and then more talks about 3 and 2 and 1. So we're going on the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter by chapter, but item by item, trying to explain them all. So we can always go back and try to read it a little bit more and to understand it a little bit more by watching and discussing later. So now we are in blessed are the afflicted, and Kardec, being a teacher, he will start by asking the question. Doesn't ask in writing, but the idea is that he asks, why do we suffer? Is there justice in being afflicted? Is there justice in crying, as Jesus says? And I'm going to read the verses that Kardec took from the Bible. All the verses he took from the Sermon on the Mount, either written by Matthew or by Luke. But these verses are from the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus was talking to all people. They're talking about the blessings and these blessings, right? These how do we say it in English? These beatitudes. We call it bem-aventuranças in Portuguese. In English, they call it the beatitudes. So items number 1 and 2 are quotes from the Bible. And Kardec in Matthew says, Jesus said, and Matthew took note, on chapter 5, verses 4, 6, and 10. Blessed are they who weep, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are they who hunger or thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are they who suffer persecution because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. This was Matthew. Then here comes Luke with some other verses. You are blessed, you who are poor, for the kingdom of heaven is yours. You are blessed, you who now hunger, for you shall be filled. You are fortunate, you who now weep, for you shall laugh. But woe to you who are rich, for you have your consolation in this world. Woe to you who are filled, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who now laugh, for you shall be reduced to mourning and tears. These are in Luke, chapter 6, verses 20, 21, 24, and 25. And then Kardec starts his writing or his reflections on this topic by saying, how can we understand this if we don't understand that there's going to be another life? Because it is very, very weird to think that someone would say, oh, bless you who are crying, who are in desperation, who are suffering, because you will be consoled, you will be comforted. And then you die, and then that's it. Your comfort is to die. Your comfort is to suffer even more, or let other people suffer because you died. So Kardec starts the chapter by asking this question. And that's why I thought it was very important for me to go back to the previous chapters and show that Jesus, in so many different instances throughout his life, was showing us that we are more than just a body. That we need to understand this, that we really need to have this idea deep within ourselves. That we are not a body, that we are a spirit, an immortal spirit, that we were created without a body before we were born. And then we were born in terms of materiality. Then we got a body. Then we were born here on earth. But we were created before that. And we will have another life. The first one, after this one, is a continuation, direct continuation. I die physically, my body stays behind, I go on. as a spirit. So once we understand this, then we have to start thinking, okay, so what's the consequence of that? What is the consequence of dying and not dying? Who am I going to be, right? Oh, so I'm going to travel to North Carolina. So when I get to North Carolina, am I going to be a new man, a new Mackenzie? Why would that happen? Why? So the same idea here. If I travel from this life to the dead life, why am I going to be different? If I am what I am, like the music says, right? I am what I am. Right? So if I am what I am, and then I die, why should I be different? Now we keep going and thinking, okay, so we don't know how long it will take for us on the other side, whatever the time is. What happens to everything that I did here? What happens to everything that I did, not only to myself, but to other people? Is that everything is erased from eternity, and then who I made suffer, who I made happy, and then nothing is worth anything else? Nothing is worth nothing? So it means that I can do whatever I want, whatever I please, and then nothing has consequences? Of course, that when we start thinking this way, we could start talking and going into so many different ideas and so many different perspectives. And but the question here is, let's imagine, and that's why once again I decided to go back to the previous chapters. The chapter that we just finished last month talks about reincarnation. So taking that as truth, I died, I am on the spiritual plane, or whatever name I want to call it. Then comes a time when I have to come back. Now what happens when I come back? And that's one of the things that Spiritism is so clear about, that sometimes it's scary. Because although we really believe in consequences, and I think we believe in consequences because we know that if I put my arm in a place that's really warm, I'm going to be, burned. Or if I stay outside without covering in this freezing temperatures, I'm going to get sick. I can die. I can have a frostbite. I know, we all know, and we all understand consequences. We all understand it because it's part of nature. It's part of everything that we do. If I'm speaking here and everything is working, I know that if somebody connects to the internet, they're going to watch and hear what I'm saying. I know that if I decide to pull this podium up, the podium will walk. If it doesn't, roll, it can fall and tip over. If I throw this book up, it will fall down. We all know that everything that we do as a cause, there's a consequence to it. When we talked about the first chapter, I have not come to destroy the law. One of the concepts that Kardec presents on that chapter is the concept of God. That Spiritism has it very clear. There is a God. That's the very first question of the Spirit's book. Once I heard that a person may be suggesting that Kardec did not believe in God, and said, how come a person that does not believe that God exists asks the first question? The first question is not, is there a God? Does God exist? No. The question presumes and assumes that God exists, because the question is, what is God? So it already knows that God exists. What Kardec wants to know is, what is God? It doesn't ask if God exists and is depending on the spirits to let him know that God exists. No, he assumes that God exists, period. Now let's move on. Next question, what is God? So we have to assume that God exists for this to make sense. Then that's where Kardec goes with his explanation, his line of thought. If we know that God exists, and if we really believe that for God to be God, God needs to be perfectly good, perfectly just, will do everything the best way there is to be done, there needs to be a reason for why we suffer. There needs to be a reason for what's happening in our lives. And then when we merge all these ideas together, which are combined on the very first 4 chapters of this book, then we start to understand that if we are suffering, then there needs to be a reason for it. There is justice in what's going on. In the rest of the chapter, Kardec will propose a lot of different ways for us to see why we suffer. But we have to understand, and this is a very, very, very important point. We have to understand that if we suffer, there is a reason for it. Maybe I don't know what it is. Maybe I don't remember what the reason is. Maybe I don't want to know what the reason is. But there is a reason. The same way, if a book fell, either it was up there, somebody put it in a place to fall, or somebody just threw it. These days I was watching the Brazilian news with, unfortunately, some terrible news, as more frequent than I would like, than we would like. There was this boy, 8-year-old, 6-year-old, I don't remember, was killed in Rio de Janeiro by a stray bullet, which is unfortunately not that uncommon. And why was he killed by a stray bullet? Because a person decided, some people at the end of the year, 31st to the 1st, they had guns, and then they just shoot out in the air. And I don't think that those bullets that go up will go down. And maybe a lot of those bullets hit nobody. All of a sudden you see that there's a hole somewhere. What is this? And you will never know what it is. Then one day you find a bullet in your floor. Oh, that was a stray bullet. Fortunately, I was not there. There was another lady that was with her kids, and she was hit. She said, I don't know what was going on. I mean, all of a sudden I feel this thing in my foot, and I'm walking, something wrong, and what did I step on? And then she couldn't feel, she didn't know where it was, what happened, and then she went to the hospital, and they took an x-ray. It's a bullet in her feet. We understand, but apparently we don't want to do anything about it. So if a bullet goes up, it will go down. If I hit someone, there will be a consequence to it. It may not be now, but if life is just in the long run, not now specifically, there will be consequences to it. It will not be erased by magic, as if I had done nothing. The other way too, if I did something good to someone and somebody hit me back, I did my part. If the other person didn't do, there's something that's going to happen with that. It will depend on what I did. It will depend on what the other did, how I feel, what am I doing. So if I am suffering, if there's something wrong happening to me, there needs to be an explanation. If we believe in this God that does not have a party, does not have a preferred team, does not have a preferred country, despite all of us saying that God is Brazilian. Of course, it's not, but I don't know why we chose to say that. And maybe we believe it, and maybe that's why everything is so wrong, because we think maybe that God will always look for us and not look for anybody else because, taking party. Just like we used to say, oh, God of Israel. That's why Elijah, for example, killed all those men that were adoring the God of Baal. And then he burned everybody because his God was more powerful. What was he doing? If not separating, creating separation. Oh, we show that God is more powerful. Yeah, but there's consequences to it. To anything and to everything there are consequences. Why do we suffer later on? And I don't know. We don't remember. I don't know exactly what it is. But we have to understand that it needs to have an explanation. And the entire chapter, that's what Kardec will do. He will give many different explanations and pinpoint different possibilities for everything that we're suffering. But the main point, that's where he starts, it is as if he's saying, look, if you still didn't understand, stop it right now, go back to the 4 chapters and read the 4 chapters again. Because from now on, what we're going to do is we're going to use these 4 chapters as a basis for everything else that we're going to study. For everything else that Jesus taught. These are very important topics. I have not come to destroy the law. My kingdom is not of this world. The reincarnation, chapter 4. And there are many mentions in God's universe. We are immortal spirits. This is the main message. And because we don't die, there's always going to be the learning process of making mistakes and having to go through whatever the consequences of those mistakes and learn so that we don't commit the same mistakes again. Just like the very old tale, which is true, we just don't know the numbers, at least I don't know the right numbers, although I always heard the same number. Thomas Edison, the creator of the light, of the lamp, that today we don't even use the lamp that he created anymore because it spends a lot of energy. Today we have those LED lights, right, which consumes less than 10% of the same amount to produce the same amount of light than the incandescent lights of the past. And trying to create the light, trying to create the lamp, trying to create it, and couldn't do it. 700 times, tried this, tried that, tried this, tried that. His assistant came to him and said, hey, let's give up. This is, taking too long. It's too much. 700 times, what a waste of time. Said, look, now I know 700 ways of how not to do it. So I'm not going to commit the same mistakes. I tried 700 times. Those are in the past. Let's try something new. And he kept trying, and I don't know, 2 weeks later, whatever, he found one of the best components that he could use. Then light was created, or lamps were created. If he had given up. That's learning, not trying to make a mistake. That's different. Some people say, oh, make mistakes. No. Try to do the right thing. Then, if a mistake is made, that's fine, because you're trying to do something good. It's different than, let's kill a person to learn. What? Right? It's, we can distort everything, right? So let's try to do the best thing, the right thing. Then, of course, we are imperfect. We will not make it correctly the first time. I remember, maybe lots of stories like that. Person just got married, had a big family, and she learned how to cook for her big family, like 10 brothers, 2 sisters, mother, father. She learned how to cook. So she gets married, goes to cook, and cooks her first meal for her husband. He is going to eat. He starts eating, and he puts the first fork on the mouth, and she asks him, "Is it good?" And then he cannot even speak. And she says, "Is it good or not?" And he said, "It's good." She sits down and she tries it herself. She puts salt for 15 people in the same food, in the less amount of food. Of course it was terrible, but she was doing it for love, for him and for herself. That's a honest mistake. That's not on purpose that you do this and then you try to hit the other person. Then, of course, she learns with the mistake, and next time she will reduce the amount of salt. And that's perfect. There is nothing wrong in that picture. It's the learning process that counts. The problem is when we don't notice this, and then we keep repeating the same mistakes. We don't learn with our mistakes. And then we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. There will come a time when life will say, "Hey, look, now you've got to stop." And what happens then? Affliction, suffering. And you probably don't know what's going on because you think that you're doing the right thing. So we don't stop to think about what we're doing, and then we start suffering the consequences, and then we start complaining. It's a long process. It's a process of course, learning, of understanding ourselves, of studying the others, studying our behavior, how we behave towards each other, what we're doing, what the other one is doing, observing, lots of observations, observing nature, how does nature does this, does that other thing, and then trying to make it, to try to absorb it so that we can mimic, we can do it again, we can do something similar. And then we have the models. We have Jesus. And if I'm following the Buddha, choose the Buddha to follow. If I like the Dalai Lama and his kind approach to everything, follow the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama, of a lot of people that I've heard speak, and I've heard stories of, that are living, not talking about people who are dead, that are living. There might be lots of people that are as kind as he is, but to me, it would be one of the most kindest persons that I've ever seen or heard talking or doing stuff. But we, instead of uniting, we tend to divide. So, this person and that person. And we just create division, affliction, because division only causes affliction. So it's a long process. It's a long process of learning, of understanding why we suffer. But at the moment when we can look from a different perspective, from the Spiritist perspective, looking from up above and seeing, okay, this mistake, maybe I'm suffering this because I am still like this. So it will not make the pain go away. Will not. But it will give me this comfort of at least understanding that, hey, look, maybe I cannot avoid this suffering now, but if I can learn with this, maybe I will avoid another suffering later on. Because that's how it is. If I get a terrible grade on my exam, what can I do? I already took the exam. I have to study more, so next exam I don't get a bad grade. That's how things are. Oh, I just created this cake. It's terrible. How can I fix the cake? I can't fix the cake, but I can start a new cake and pay more attention. What did I do wrong to create this cake? And then start a better cake for next time. Is it oh, I'm hungry. Yeah, but what can you do? Now eat the banana that you didn't want to eat. And meanwhile, while you're eating the banana, start studying for the next cake or for the next meal, for the next. It doesn't solve the problem that we're living now, but it takes us from that moment to look at that moment from a different perspective. It makes us understand that if we believe that really there is a God, there is an explanation. Kardec will spend the rest of the chapter, like I said before, pinpointing different causes for why we suffer, for afflictions. The present causes for afflictions, causes for affliction that are in previous lives. So he will start going step by step, trying to make us understand that if we don't find anything that's making me suffer in this life, maybe it's from a different life. But he says, most of the times, or I would say most of the times, a lot of times we don't remember what we did in this life. I'm not talking about the previous life. And then we suffer a consequence of something that I did, and I don't even know that that's a consequence of what I did because I was not paying attention. And then later on, I'll regret it. If I regret, what should I do? Learn not to do it again. So the continuous process of learning in school, in life, in anything that we're doing, anything, right? There was a time when it was hard for us to write our names. Now it's easy to write our names because we practice, because we tested it. It was hard to make, to add numbers. It was hard to remember this thing. It was hard, but no, we made a mistake. We corrected it. Spiritism gives us this power of looking at our lives from up above, from the way Jesus taught us to look at our lives, not only through this very, very tiny eyes that we have when we are incarnated. We see it only a small portion of our lives when we are incarnated here. And then we think that we're only here for this amount of years. No, let's think in a bigger picture. Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's think, let's try to come back to ourselves and ask ourselves, do we really believe in God? If I really believe in God, in what God do I believe? And is it a God that's all powerful, all just, all merciful, and all good? Or is it a God that I think it's vengeful, that hates? If I believe that, then why would this God be a God? If it's like me, it needs to be better than I am, what I am. It needs to be more perfect than I am. It needs to be actually all perfect. And if he is, or she is, God is all perfect, everything needs to have a reason. And even if I don't know what the reason is, and if I understand that we shall love God above everything else, like Jesus said, like Jesus repeated from the Old Testament, and if we love God above everything, we would say, thank you, God, for what I'm going through. And help me go through it. Because I know that even though, if I don't understand why I'm going through this, I know it's for the better of me. It's for my improvement. It's for me to grow. Help me go through it. If I can't avoid it, please let me avoid it. But if I can't, help me through it. Help me go through it. One day I will understand and I'll say, really, thank you. Maybe now I'm saying without wanting to say, but maybe one day I'll be able to say thank you for allowing me the chance to go through this, because I know I did this in the past. And I unfortunately created the future that I'm living right now in the present. And one day, by understanding and by um, living through it, and by learning to love, like we read in the initial message, by learning to love one another, you will really understand why Jesus told us, blessed are those who cry, for they will be comforted. May our cries be more of happiness than of sadness. But if we are crying because we are sad, let's pray to God and let's pray to Jesus, because they will always be with us, trying to help and making us be stronger to go through all the problems and all the tribulations in our lives. One day, we will all be happier than we are at this very moment. So I'd like to thank you, give a big thank you to everyone. It's this chapter is really really important to all of us, because there's not one single person in this planet who does not need this chapter. We are all afflicted in one degree or another, in one moment of our lives or another. And it is very important for us to take this chapter deep within our hearts as a first step in the grand scheme, so that one day we can really really be happy and be consoled. Um, right now, are we going to have the passes? Is going to take the passes or not? Oh, so as they are preparing the water back there, let's just um, together with them, they're going to do a prayer back there, and we do a prayer here, so we can close everybody together our meeting just by focusing even more, if we can, by thinking about God, this supreme intelligence of the universe and creator of all things, first cause of everything. Dear God, we are so blessed to be here once again in this planet, to learn the lessons that we should have learned already. But we are still struggling with our own problems, with our inner difficulties. But we raise our hands, our heads, our thoughts, and our hearts to you as a sign of thank you for all these blessings that we've been receiving at all times. Wishing that these blessings that we feel at this moment may enter the lives of all those who are in our lives, our family, our friends, our co-workers, hoping that they all feel your power, your love in their lives. And may your love that touches and encompasses the entire universe be felt in the deep and dark corners of our hearts, so that we can finally understand that the best way of being loved by you is learning how to love one another. May your presence in our lives be felt, be seen, be heard in every little second that we are awake, and at those moments that we are asleep. May we go to you to learn even more, to work if possible, so that we don't waste more time. Help us, dear Lord. Help us understand that the best way to receive is actually to give. To give from ourselves, of ourselves to others. And may your love embrace us and take good care of us. Not only now, not only tonight, but for always and always. So be it. So I guess that's it for tonight. We are having, I don't think there is any special announcements for tonight, other than let's remind ourselves to do the God at home or the gospel at home, however we want to call it, which is we sit one day or one night for about 15 minutes to half an hour, get the gospel according to Spiritism, get one of these message books and open it up, read it out loud with our family, with our friends. If we are alone, do it by yourself so that we can keep learning more and actually understanding and feeling more the presence of the good spirits and the presence of Jesus in our home, so that we invite him to be with us and protect not only our home but our neighbors. So the gospel at home is done once a week at least at the same time in our homes, so that we can help have this environment be even more protected, spiritually speaking. And is there any special?
No, the only thing is Saturday, I'm gonna make the food.
Oh, that's good. So if you're
Okay.
watching and if you want to come, watching you cannot eat. But
Yeah.
this Saturday, Chris is going to make dinner for us here at Cantinho. So if you can
With
come with love. That's good. With love, so you can come to our meeting and to eat Chris's food. And I guess that's it for tonight. Next month, we will probably have Hendrik here, continuing with chapter 5. And I hope seeing you soon. Have a great week, and we will return.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Nossa.